So this was inspired by a woman named Anna Deavere Smith, who did two one-woman shows about riots in the United States. One was the LA riots after the Rodney King trials, and that was just pent-up frustration of poor Black populations. And the other was Crown Heights, New York, which was riots between Blacks and Jews. And she interviewed all these people and became them. Became like she actually said the words that they said in the interviews. Like she'd do a skit of, between 5 and 10 minutes talking this person's words while she was dressed up and acting like that person. And she's a light-skinned Black woman, so she could play all these different people. She could be white, she could be Black, she could be Hispanic, she could be Asian, all these different kinds of people she could easily be. And what you end up, you watch these, 15, 20 different, totally different perspectives. People who were doing the violent acts, people who were justifying them, people who were scared, on all these different sides of public officials, community organizers, cops. It's just like all these different people. And you always see her face in it. So there's like this unifying thing. Here's this human being. All these people are human beings. And each of their perspectives, when you're in the middle of it, it totally makes sense. But you hear the next one that goes, those two stories do not go together, So what I got out of that was the choice of the word self-legitimizing here. Each of us, when we're in a conflict or dealing with an issue, has strong opinions or something on something. We have a self-legitimizing dynamic that goes on. There's a psychological word for it. I'm trying to remember. Confirmation bias. When we hear and seek out the evidence that will support our view, and to disregard or not even look at, delegitimize perspectives that don't fit our view. And also the psychological reality that certainty is an emotion. It is independently variable from the actual facts of the matter. We can feel certain about something that is absolutely true, and we can feel very unsure about something that's totally true. So there's a sense of a viewpoint is a viewpoint. It's not a fact. It's a way of looking at things because of the way we've been raised, the way we've come to believe, the different experiences we've had. We see things in a particular way. And in the face of conflict, or even just in ordinary everyday flow of conversations and engagements, these different ways we see things, because we live in our own world, we bump up against other people's perspectives that are different from ours. And what multiple viewpoint drama does is kind of legitimize how different people think. It presents, and it sort of helps you be compassionate and willing to consider what somebody else thinks and feels, that is, or stories of their experience that are radically different from yours, and come to be able to relate to them one way or another, which opens the door towards exploring what might be real or satisfying or desirable to you both. So it's a fundamental, it's an artistic form that lays the groundwork for people to be able to relate to each other and work together. So I say every conflict or issue has at least two self-legitimizing sides, and usually more. The fact that that we think in terms of quote unquote both sides is a thought-limiting cliche. The fact is there's always more than two sides. Even when there's only two people in the argument, there's always other sides that are floating around the edges. So the more of these we can present, the more real and truly complex and reflective of the situation it becomes. But each person's story their side, their sense of things, their viewpoint contains information and perspectives which we all need to access in order to understand what's going on in this situation. And there's also energy there. The energy is also information. If somebody is feeling very strongly about some aspect of this situation, that strong feeling itself is part of the situation and needs to be taken into account and addressed and worked with. That strong feeling may have energy that we can use to change the situation in positive ways. There's energy that's pushing in a direction that we want to go. Or it could be energy that is in the way of what's needed. Either way, needing to address it in an intelligent, wise manner is part of the picture. So getting their stories, getting their viewpoints, their perspectives is really important. So this is, we're looking at multiple viewpoint drama. The underlying challenge is to present all these different perspectives compassionately. It's like this is something that is worthy of consideration. This is not just some stupid, dismissible thing. This is something that is real. It's part of what's going on. So let's get into it and feel our way together. So that's a compassionate and compelling. It's like, let's get the energy. Let's see it. Let us come to a point where we can see it as filled with energy and importance as the person for whom it's natural to feel that way and think that way. So we want that compassionate, compelling presentation for all the different perspectives that are present, so that we, whoever we are who are involved in the situation, whoever we are who are trying to deal with this situation, or the whole population, whoever is involved can actually see what needs to be taken into account for a long-term benefit, broad benefit. That's our working definition of wisdom here. So if we want truly wise solutions, we need to feel into these different perspectives, and this drama is a way of doing it. So as I said, Anna Deavere Smith has a very highly developed and totally fact-based way of doing it, because she bases her performance on these interviews with these real people involved in these real situations. Arnold Mindell has an activity called Process World Work, or Deep Democracy. He is a quantum field physicist who became a psychologist through Jungian psychology, and he thinks in terms of fields of energy and archetypal voices in this field. So he deals with large social issues like racism. So in the field of racism, there are voices of oppressed, voices of withdrawn, voices of attack, judgment. All these voices are out there, and he doesn't care who those voices come from. He wants those voices to come up, show up, and interact with each other. And so he is by that, design, he is bringing forth all those different viewpoints into. It's not just dramatized. Like, people aren't just acting out like Anna Deavere Smith is. He's like bringing out the actual people and the way they feel into the space to talk together. Playback theater is a practice of hearing somebody's story or watching some activity and then being an improvisational mirror to that person or those people who are involved in the situation. And they creatively go through the kind of motions and interactions which are appropriate for whatever. Somebody tells a story of what happened to them, some tragic event in their life. Their mother did this, their father did this, the guy who came in did this, and it's like So the playback theater people take that story and act it out in front of the person and everybody else, often with significant shifts in the person's perspective. So they are taking on the different voices in the situation. And this could be applied to political issue, public issue kinds of matters too. I don't know if it has been or not, but that model is very alive. Dynamic facilitation does it in real time by having people speak and giving them the space, everybody involved in the situation, giving them the space to really say their sense of the truth, their perspective, and be honored and heard for that perspective. That's part of the facilitation technique in dynamic facilitation. And the Maclean's magazine in Canada, they chose people for their differences and in a very public way had them engage in conversation with each other that was designed to come up with some, if possible, come up with some shared vision of for Canada during a time 25 years ago when it's a very divided country. So because it was public, in a sense, it's like Anna Deavere Smith's stuff, because it took these very different people who it showed you. Here's this person who believes this, here's this person who believes that, here's this person who believes another thing. These are strong-willed, vocal representatives of these perspectives, and we're going to put them together and have them talk, and you're going to watch them, see how they interact, see where work goes well, see where it doesn't, see what they come up with. So this is a multiple viewpoint drama that is real in real time. This is not being acted out. And of course, certain documentaries focus on that. The style of the documentary is to document this person's perspective and that person's perspective and that person's perspective. And that is very good, and it's much more easy to do than having a dramatic artist like Anna Deavere Smith. But Anna Deavere Smith has this funny thing I notice of her face always being in the middle, and there's something humanizing about having her face there all the time, as opposed to somebody's very different face. You can kind of keep them separate. You don't have the same subliminal linkage of all these people as being all human beings with legitimate struggling perspectives. But the documentaries are really valuable, and they're also fictional representations. Kurosawa is very famous for a movie called Rashomon, which has a number of different people who all have a different perspective on an instance of rape. And within the movie, he has all of them speaking what they each saw or heard or believed happened. And those different perspectives don't really quite fit together. So there's a funny way in which you get the same feeling as when you're watching Anna Deavere Smith, that they're these different perspectives. And their research on eyewitnesses, there's more and more research that is showing you, when you show these people a movie of the same situation, and you then ask them sometime later after some other activities to describe what it was that they saw. And people describe it differently, even though they were watching the same movie, to say nothing of, being across the street from each other when a real life incident happens. And this is shaking up the whole sense of the most dependable evidence we have in a trial as eyewitnesses. They were there, they saw it. But the fact is, they experience different things, and then they remember different things. And there's a way in which that's problematic, and there's a way in which that's valuable. The story of the blind men and the elephant, they're all feeling the elephant, and somebody's feeling the elephant's ear, and he thinks that the elephant is like a giant plant with big leaves. Another's feeling the leg and says, this is actually like a plant, but it's got this fat trunk. Another's feeling the trunk and feels it's like a snake. So they're all creating their image of what this elephant is, that none of them are seeing the whole thing. But if they got together and talked, they might be able to come up with a model of what the elephant looked like. That's not part of the story, but it's part of the implications of this. In preparations for deliberation, there's a group called National Issues Forums. It's one of the largest groups that has citizens deliberate for usually it's an evening or an afternoon or something about some public issue, and they're given briefing materials either in written or video form, which do brief descriptions of 3 to 5 perspectives on this issue, whatever issue it is they're deliberating. And it's presented to embody the legitimacy, the argumentation, as people saying, you know, if there was somebody from that perspective, they would be arguing this way. And they would say, this is what makes sense. This is why it makes sense. Here's all the evidence. I'm going to try and convince you with it. And they move on to another perspective. So the people who are deliberating have entered into the worldviews of several different people before they start talking about what's involved with this issue. So that is a more analytic, you know, we are analyzing the issue and creating these 3 to 5 perspectives that kind of represent the conversation that's happening around this issue, so that people are brought up to speed before they even start their deliberations. They are sense what's going on in this conflict. And lastly, I could say many novels, it's one of the powers of, and short stories, one of the powers of fiction, and all fiction, movies in general, but novels also, is to climb into the world. Like really, really high quality novels, you climb into somebody's head and into their life experience in such a way that you go, oh, that's different from my way of looking at things. That's different from what I've lived through, but I get it. I get it why that person thinks and feels that way. So both within specific efforts to deliberate on a particular issue on behalf of the larger society, and in general in the larger society, all these approaches can help people be able to see more clearly the multiple viewpoints that make up any given situation as a situation. And that's their gift, because we want to have, you know, our wiser democracy. We want to have people who can see into that as part of the complexity of whatever it is they're addressing, so that they can take that into account and generate the kinds of benefits that would satisfy most or all of those people involved. I realize also there's another practice of the, what is it called? Council of All Beings. This is an effort to bring in the viewpoints of other species. So you have people in the council who are there to speak for certain trees, certain animals, you know, certain plants, whatever, certain landscapes, you know, mountain, whatever. They're there to try and speak for the perspective and issues, information, whatever, that those entities who usually can't participate in our councils. It's a reflection of some of the things that happen in some native cultures, also to give voice to all our relations. So that's it for that. I will add